Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the VLV Autumn Conference. We're delighted that so many of you have signed up for this event, which of course we're doing in this virtual form as opposed to our normal conference and talking to you. But we're very pleased that we've got an excellent lineup for you today, and with excellent speakers and indeed top-class chairs and more. Just a couple of housekeeping things first. These things occasionally technologically can go wrong. If the screen goes blank, if any problems of that kind, just tune in again using the same link as we had before. And if by any chance, the extremely unlikely case of us being Zoom bombed, we'll just have to end the conference. That is, as I say, extremely unlikely. So let's get going with the conference topic. And I'd like to begin by introducing the first moderator, who will then introduce our first speaker. The moderator is Ray Snoddy, very well known to most of us, a long-term eminent reporter and columnist and commentator about the broadcast, a great friend of the VLV. So thank you, Ray, and now over to you.
Good morning, Colin, and thank you very much indeed for that introduction. It gives me enormous pleasure to be talking and listening later to Maria Kyriacou, who is an American from Viacom. And being an American, of course, she's a president. She's president Viacom for UK and Australia, but that means in our case, in charge of Channel 5. Now, Channel 5 is a very interesting phenomenon. When Viacom bought it, many people thought, an American multinational, it'll just be flooded with American programs. Something strange happened. Instead of that, the absolute opposite came to pass. Creative programs made in Britain, almost more public service broadcaster than public service broadcasters traditionally are. Programs like All Creatures Great and Small, Yorkshire Vet, high quality documentaries, drama, and more children's programs in their milkshake segment than any other public service broadcaster. Maria, tell me why you did that, why you changed expectations and how you did it.
Well, hello, and first of all, just a clarification, as you can hear from my accent, not American. Many things are not American. Thank you for the invitation to address today's event, and from the comfort of my spare bedroom, as you can see, no less. So I'm Maria Kyriacou, and I'm president of ViacomCBS's networks operations in Australia, Israel, and the UK, which alongside our pay TV brands such as Nick and MTV and our streaming services Pluto and Paramount Plus, gives me oversight of Britain's youngest, smallest, and most dynamic public service broadcaster, Channel 5. And it is Channel 5 that is the focus for today's discussion. And before I continue, I'm going to play a short video for you. Now, Channel 5 hasn't been a regular participant at these VLV events, so I want to take advantage of this platform to share with you the turnaround it's experienced under ViacomCBS's ownership. And I also want to broaden my horizons and consider the strengths and benefits of the PSB framework in the UK, the consumer and economic trends impacting the PSB provision, and potential solutions to ensure the balanced PSB system that has served us so well for so long in this country is not irreversibly weakened in a digitally fragmented future. I joined ViacomCBS and took over responsibility for Channel 5 in February of this year. And what an extraordinary 10 months it's been. 10 heightened months that have highlighted the value that the public sector broadcasters bring to the UK media industry, and 10 months that have accelerated the threats and challenges that face us. When ViacomCBS completed its takeover in 2014, Channel 5's schedules were packed with films, CSI and Big Brother, and some politicians and PSB colleagues, Ray amongst them, assumed American ownership could only lead to a further influx of imports. But under our long-serving Director of Programmes, Ben Frau, the opposite has happened, with the Channel 5 schedule shifting noticeably towards UK origination since 2014, with original hours up 40%, and Big Brother finally getting a taste of its own medicine and being evicted. Channel 5 has carved out a position as a major provider of quality factual programming, with a 70% increase in original factual hours since 2014. And alongside returning observational documentaries, such as Ben Fogle's New Lives in the Wild, GPs Behind Closed Doors, and Rating Smash It, Our Yorkshire Farm, the channel airs series on British history and natural history, as well as showcasing feature-length documentaries on domestic social issues. Last month, Channel 5 won its first Grierson Documentary Award for Suicidal, in Our Own Words, a brave and compelling film, although harrowing to watch. Channel 5 now accounts for 1 in 8 of every hour of factual programming broadcast across the 5 main PSB channels. And that's before we take account of the 500 plus hours of popular current affairs we broadcast each year under the banner of the Jeremy Vine Show, or the 5.5 hours of 5 News we air each week. We've also branched out to tell fictional British stories, as well as factual ones, with our remake of All Creatures Great and Small attracting 5 million viewers, making it one of the highlights of this, or indeed any other year. And Channel 5 is the only commercial PSB to offer a dedicated, branded block of programming for children on its primary linear channel every single day of the year. Milkshake reached an incredible 19.5 million viewers last year, and it's the brand leader for preschool television in the UK. We've committed to doubling the number of episodes of original British children's content we produce from 2021 and beyond. And through this total overhaul of our schedules, we have transformed our creative reputation, with Channel 5 being judged Channel of the Year by the Edinburgh TV Festival, by Broadcast Magazine and the RTS. And with that reputational shift has come a ratings uplift. To date in 2020, Channel 5 has grown its share of viewing more than any other PSB and delivered its highest share of ABC One audiences for 10 years. Now, the foundations for this success were laid before I arrived. They were built by a tight-knit team at Channel 5 that has shown incredible tenacity and a commitment to constant improvement. And what I want to emphasize is that by increasing the plurality of supply in key PSB genres, Channel 5 helps ensure the benefits of PSB content reach the widest possible audience. Take 5 News, for example, which is a significantly differentiated audience than the BBC, Channel 4 and even Sky. Our news audience is far more regional, it's more female, and more likely to come from working class households. That plurality is also reflected in our suppliers. We commissioned programming from more than 110 independent producers last year, and that's a 50% increase over the last 5 years. And we have a marked bias towards smaller regional independents who account for 40% of our supplier base. Our success with regional independents has resulted from a mentoring initiative introduced in 2018, and last year we launched a similar initiative to champion Black, Asian, minority ethnic-owned production companies. I'm very proud of Channel 5's contribution to ensuring our TV schedules reflect the lived experience of British citizens in all our diversity. We recently announced a no diversity, no commission policy and a talent scheme to identify a fresh influx of diverse on-screen contributors, alongside a host of other initiatives designed to improve representation on-screen, off-screen, and within our own organisation. This is a palpable moment of change, and we are stepping up our contribution to reflect and shape British culture, whilst also helping to support and develop Britain's creative industries. What Channel 5's transformation underlines is that to succeed, it is essential to compete on quality. The competitive PSB framework and the broad range of regulation that underpins it has given rise to a world-class production sector, which is a jewel in the UK's economic crown. Our current PSB framework guarantees a broader range of quality British programmes than the market would naturally supply, made universally available to all British households and free at the point of use. Channel 5 plays an important role within that framework, contributing to the raising of creative standards and ensuring plurality of supply. We strive to be additive and differentiated, enriching the public benefits delivered by our PSB system, while serving our own commercial interests, of course. If ever there was a time that demonstrates the benefits of our plural PSB system and how well it serves our citizens, then surely it is now. Ratings for broadcast news bulletins have spiked as audiences seek impartial and trusted sources in a blizzard of disinformation and fake news. Lockdown, once again in our homes, isolated from our friends and our families, it is left to the PSBs to deliver those moments of shared experience, to remind us of the values we have in common and the ties that bind us as communities and as a society. I am grateful to the DCMS, to PACT and other industry bodies, and to our peers and colleagues across the broadcast and production sectors for their support and cooperation at this time of unprecedented upheaval, and for pulling together to make a return to production as safe as possible. Unfortunately, the pandemic has also underlined the fragility of the foundations on which our PSB framework rests. Like ITV and Channel 4, Channel 5 experienced a 40% downturn in its advertising revenues in the second quarter of this year as the first lockdown impacted the economy. Alongside the licence fee, it is advertising revenue that primarily underpins that £2.5 billion that the PSB spent on original content each year. And advertising for us accounts for 95% of Channel 5's revenues. Now, we expect that advertising revenue will eventually recover from this downward cycle, but TV spot revenues are in long-term decline, with audiences spending less time viewing scheduled TV and more time streaming video on demand. The economics of being an advertiser-supported PSB are now significantly more challenging than they were when Viacom acquired Channel 5 6 years ago. Challenges that mean we need to make sure our house is in order and we are operating as efficiently as possible. Channel 5 is already the leanest and most efficient of the PSBs, with around 70% of our total revenues spent on content going directly to programming. Channel 5 derives significant economic benefit as well from ViacomCBS's global presence in more than 180 countries. It allows us to share costs and infrastructure with our pay TV networks, including MTV and Nickelodeon, as I mentioned previously, and to take advantage of global investment in digital technologies, including new streaming platforms and products. However, in order to sustain continued investment, the model on which PSBs are based must be supported. The PSB's collective investment in British creativity looks certain to decline if no further market interventions are contemplated. Of course, any solution to strengthen the foundation of our PSB framework for the long term must start with the PSBs themselves. Lean and efficient is good, but we must also be innovative, and we must also increase engagement on digital platforms. Finding new ways to reach audiences that are more consistent with the way they live and consume now, if we are not to lose relevance. Our digital player, My5, is an increasingly important delivery mechanism for Channel 5's content. And My5 has doubled its on-demand viewing by 50% year on year in 2020 thus far. We are investing to expand the range of content we make freely available on My5, and we're investing into improving personalization and functionality, and therefore enhancing reach and impact. And indeed, the digital players of all the PSBs have a critical public role to play in supporting the digital transition of all viewers, not just those who can afford multiple subscriptions to SVOD services. As well as working to engage our audiences with our long-form programs on digital platforms, we also need to innovate with new formats, particularly news, to make it more accessible on social platforms. The critical outcome from Ofcom's review of public service broadcaster must be to reinforce our existing framework. But as well as reinforcing, government must extend it. Given it was last adjusted meaningfully by the Communications Act in 2003, when, if you remember back that far, Netflix was still a postal DVD service, it is definitely, surely time to update it. Existing prominence rules should be extended to cover digital platforms, just as Ofcom has already recommended, ensuring PSB providers and their programs are kept front of mind as content interfaces evolve. We know it is difficult for government to find time in the parliamentary schedule to implement Ofcom's recommendations, but we urge ministers to make time for this issue as soon as possible. It is also fundamental that there is a level playing field between broadcasters and digital content providers, particularly when it comes to advertising regulation, which is not currently the case. And we should also look at new funding models to support PSB delivery. Now, the Young Audiences Content Fund, a relatively new young fund, introduced to boost the delivery of original British children's content, is a contestable fund blueprint for a new form of targeted intervention that could be applied to other forms of PSB content. Channel 5 has secured funding for 8 commissions so far with the help of that fund that will enrich Milkshake's content offer including regional live action series such as Mimi's World and Meet the Expert, which would not have been economically viable otherwise. A similar model could support other important genres that struggle to attract investment because of their limited value in the secondary rights market, news and current affairs programming, for example, as well as British documentaries and other forms of specialist factual. Now, I love television, and I feel truly privileged to have spent the majority of my adult life working in it and surrounded by so much creative vibrancy, dynamism, and diversity. I do believe this is a golden age for entertainment, with consumers enjoying greater choice over what, when, and where they watch, and with billions more being invested in quality content each year as broadcasters and streaming services compete for digital audience. There is an astonishing opportunity here for British creatives, but also I detect a fair degree of risk. As digital media fragments the audience and undermines the economics of mainstream media, some types of programming will get left behind, and the more nuanced stories will get lost, those that reflect and reinforce local cultures and local lives. I'm optimistic we have the talent and the track record in our broadcast and creative industries to adapt. But I'm also realistic enough to know that we will require the support of an updated and extended PSB framework built on plurality and competition for quality. It will continue to provide a bedrock for a wider media environment in the UK that reflects our values as a society in the here and now and shapes the kind of society that we want to be in the future. Thank you very much. So back over to Ray.
Splendid presentation, and one of hope for many in your audience that actually believe and have lived British public service broadcasting. But aren't the challenges terrible? COVID, you said, took away 40% of your spot advertising, but it also resulted in a spike of people tuning into Netflix and doing all the streamers. Isn't this an unstoppable behemoth that you're facing, a vast international companies, multi-billion companies? Can you, for all the best will in the world, can you compete against that ultimately?
We can compete on the basis of what we have been doing already, which is local content, local investment, origination, reflect local lives and local, you know, the feeling of what it is to be a modern Britain these days. That's something the SVOD providers, they do a great job, you know, have no doubt. I love a lot of what they've done. I spent the weekend binging on The Crown. However, they are never going to do what Channel 5 and the other PSBs are doing. They're never going to put 80% of their schedule dedicated to UK and a broad spectrum of genres, not just big, expensive dramas, but also smaller factual shows or children's shows or, you know, live action preschool shows. They're never going to do that. It's not economically in their interest to do that. That is why I think, you know, the free networks, not just in the UK, but around the world, will not only survive all the turmoil that's going in the media industry, they're actually going to thrive. But that doesn't negate the challenges. And the immediate challenge for us is the recovery from COVID. It's the recovery from that swing down of advertising revenue as a sort of short-term cycle.
Were you surprised at the extent to which virtue and quality was actually able to, before COVID perhaps, was actually able to pay off in commercial terms? It seems slightly counterintuitive. It would have been so much easier for you to keep Big Brother programs running and just taking in the money.
Not surprised at all. So before I joined ViacomCBS, I was at ITV Studios. So I was much more at the sort of development production end of our industry than I am now. And in those 9 years, the biggest truth, the thing that always stayed consistent was the good quality programming content was always the most valuable for us in the long term. It always was. You know, people want to see quality. They want to see content that is well made, well thought through, considerate, and entertaining.
We're in difficult political times, not just broadcasting, but society as a whole. How convinced are you this particular government really gets the value of public service broadcasting, really gets the multiplier effect of funding talent and production, and just there's a danger they might just put up their hands and say, well, look, come on, the Netflix are the future of this world.
I find that unlikely, and I'm sure you do too.
It was a provocative question.
Yeah, exactly. No, is kind of the simple answer to that. I don't think that is the government's position.
Do they therefore take it seriously enough, if not my extreme version of my fears?
Well, like I said, I think we were all really grateful at the actions that were, that everyone sort of felt it rallied around, and even the insurance protection was a significant step to trying to protect in the short term. And then I think in the long term, it's in every British government's interest to protect the creative industries and to give them a platform from which to become that sort of the all-important soft power of what Britain is. I mean, we do so well as a creative industry. Our programs go all over the world. You're talking to someone who used to sell them. When you say, I'm selling a British show, there's already an expectation of quality from everybody you speak to, wherever you go. And I don't think any government is going to erode that.
With the best will in the world, you highlighted a serious problem, together with the chief execs of the other public service broadcasters, in a letter to the Times, and you emphasised the importance of due prominence for your channels on the new platforms. How's the government going to do that? I mean, these are international bodies based in New York and California. They might just say no.
Well, Ofcom has already put out recommendations, and at this point in time, what we're asking is the government implements those recommendations. So this isn't an impossible task. Achieving prominence is more difficult on digital platforms because you haven't just got the home page. It's not about sort of what is your app on the home page. It's also about personalization, and it's about prominence for your content, not just your brand. So there are intricacies here, but
how could it actually
achievable
work?
and solvable. I'm sorry, Ray.
How could it work then? Let's assume the government understands your arguments, understands the threat, and has the best will in the world. What could they actually do to make sure that people can find PSB channels on smart TVs?
When you're talking about algorithms, you're way beyond my understanding of how algorithms work. But I know personalization and recommendation is controllable. Of course it's controllable. You've got platforms who are already deciding to prioritize their own content over third-party content. Now, if it's controllable, therefore it's something you can regulate.
And the other demand in a very good letter in the Times was that they actually have to carry your stuff in the first place. Prominence is one thing, but what if it's not there? At the moment, they don't necessarily have to even carry you. And some of these characters are now manufacturing their own television sets. So you might not even get into the devices.
It is in their interest for us to be there. Despite the proliferation of all the options people have to watch TV, it's just broadcast television or the output from broadcast commissioning that is the majority viewing experience. So given that we are delivering 5 million viewers for our drama, it is in a platform's interest to have us there. So there isn't that sort of total rejection. It's the regulation should be about setting out the ground rules about how you are prominent and where you appear and how you then manage the algorithms that result in personalization and recommendation.
And if you succeed in being there, there's another whole range of issues. The uneven playing field, they can pump out almost anything, adult material, not in the pornographic sense, material aimed at adults. And because of the nature of the streaming, it can happen 24 hours a day. Young children of my acquaintance have already found how to get access on Netflix and other places to what we would regard as unsuitable material. And yet you've got 9 p.m. thresholds and strict rules on what you can do. How can that playing field ever be equalized?
Well, I think one area where we're asking for a greater degree of equity is in advertising standards. And all of the PSPs, at one point or another, have called on more equal treatment of the online platforms versus us as broadcasters. Now we are liable for not only the programming that we put out, but also the advertising we put out around it. We have to comply it and make sure it accords with all the standards. Platforms aren't directly liable. The onus is on the brands themselves, and it feels like it's more than overdue time to review and reassess that and move the burden.
Yes, I've got some interesting questions from members of your audience. One from Lewis Rutt, obviously a member of the VLV, but also in his youth a distinguished children's production broadcaster. While admiring Channel 5's much improved schedule in recent years, is it not too dependent on personalities and formats pioneered by the larger broadcasters?
I don't know what he's talking about. Which one of the shows? I think most of our shows are new and original from us, from Ben, actually, Ben and his team. He's got a fantastic creative mind, and a lot of what you see on TV springs out of their minds. I don't think we haven't brought any formats from anyone else for quite a considerable amount.
I wonder whether he's thinking of All Creatures Great and Small, developed by the BBC and then nicked by you guys.
I wouldn't say we nicked it. I don't actually know what the conversation was with the BBC. All I know is that when Colin Callender brought it to Seb and Ben, it was the perfect drama for us. We'd had huge success with Yorkshire Vet, which, if you're a fan of Yorkshire Vet, it is one of Harriet's trainees who is the star of our factual series. It's all filmed in and around the same countryside in Yorkshire. It was so spot on that I think we just said immediately, yes, of course we want it as a series. I think we were so unequivocal in our support of it. It became a no-brainer for everyone. And look at the results. Fantastic results.
If we had a live audience, I would ask Lewis what precisely he meant, but as we can't really do that, I'll move on to a slightly self-interested question, I feel, from another VLV member, Rachel Jordan. I'm a watcher of Channel 5, but wonder how does an ordinary person get original ideas to Channel 5 without being rejected by production companies?
That's a better question for Ben and the commissioning team, I think. I think the process by which ideas are brought to us is not for me to give advice on. I know we talk to a lot of production companies. I mean, I think we've got a reputation for working with the widest group and small production companies. We like giving people a chance. It's kind of, I've walked into an organization that has a sort of culture that's built around being slightly the underdog, swinging for big hits from a position when you kind of go, I can't afford as much and I can't do as much, but I'm going to try and make it work. And that sort of underdog feel means that we kind of like the smaller companies as well. We like giving chances to new people.
And although you're not in a position to give out commissions, does that mean that you're susceptible and available to, not you personally, but your organization, for ideas from wherever they come from?
We like a broad range of ideas, no doubt.
Yes. Now, I'm struck by the number of people who talk about diversity, both in production teams and everything, and on screen and off screen, and but you seem to have done it. Is the trick, people follow the money. If you're not diverse enough and you don't get a commission, they pay attention, don't they? Is that your experience?
Well, I think we have a responsibility not just to the people that work for ViacomCBS, not just to our employees, but to the wider industry, because we are one of a few gatekeepers that exist. Commissioners decide what goes on air, and that gatekeeping role gives us a certain amount of power that we can exercise. And no diversity, no commission is a really simple statement. And there's not a complicated set of rules or quotas that flow around it. It just provides the framework. So everyone coming to us understands what our values are, and it opens the discussion, and it allows our commissioners to say, well, show me your diversity off screen. Tell me how you're going to make this diverse on screen. And if they don't like it, go back, try again, come back again with some variances that do satisfy us that you are taking the striving for inclusivity seriously.
I'm sure that VLV members will welcome the fact that the emphasis you're putting on news and not seeing news is just a bit too difficult in these times. But there's real problems. What is the responsibility of public service broadcasters in dealing with fake news? We've seen in the country that it's not yours, you're not American, I was talking about your company, but they're starting to live check facts of President Trump in real time. Is that got to be the answer? I mean, the days fairly recently, in my opinion, where you just reported what one side said and then uncritically said that Boris Johnson claimed, as opposed to examining the underlying truth of a matter. Do all broadcasters, public service broadcasters, have to pay more attention to the facts as opposed to merely reporting what people say?
Well, I think alongside all the other PSBs, we have a really robust set of controls and protocols in place to make sure that anything we report is fair and balanced. ITN are an excellent partner in this respect, and they very much know their work, and we stay in constant contact with them. There's 2 meetings a day on editorial just to ensure that we never cross the line.
I would like to talk to you for at least another half an hour, but I'm not able to, unfortunately. So the final question, and if I would ask you to be as critical of yourself and realistic as possible, where do you think Channel 5 can realistically be in 5 years' time, given the enormity of the international competition you face?
I said the word innovative somewhere in all of that speech. And I think having established ourselves as a quality supplier of quality content, the next step for us is to prioritize My5 and the on-demand platforms that we have as part of the family of channels and assets that are available to us. So the short answer is 5 will be strong, but it will probably be more skewed to an on-demand experience and a digital experience than it currently is. And we will stick to our belief in quality local content.
And original production.
And original production, yes.
Maria Kyriacou, thank you very much indeed.